Hello, historians. It is Miss Jones again, and I know you couldn't wait for another video. So here I am. All right, so today we are going to hit the topic of the emancipation and the life of a soldier. We are now focusing our attention to topic 8.5. And as we're opening up 8.5, the Civil War is going on. And Abraham Lincoln has been in the thick of things as far as the war is concerned because he is wanting to preserve the Union. But the one thing that he did not want to do is cause any issues when it dealt with slavery. All right. So I'm going to read a quote from a letter that he had sent to someone about his thoughts dealing with slavery. All right. So it says, if I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could do it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. So you see here, Abraham Lincoln found himself in a dilemma. All right. So we're going to focus our attention today on the Emancipation Proclamation. All right, here we go. Let's take a closer look. Lincoln had a reason for handling the slavery issue oh so cautiously. Now, as we have talked about before, there had been four slave states that had remained in the Union. And I have a quick map that I want to show you guys here that we're going to be referencing back and forth. All right. So it says here that there were four states that had remained in the Union, and the president did not want to do anything that might cause these states to shift their loyalty to the Confederacy. The resources of these border states might allow the South to turn the tide of the war. So by mid 1862, however, Lincoln had came to believe that he could save the Union only by broadening the goals of the war. All right, I'm going to take a closer look up here. So he had decided to emancipate or free enslaved African Americans then living in the Confederate territory. So let's look at this map a little bit closer. All right. So in the four loyal slave states, however, enslaved African Americans would not be freed, nor would African Americans be freed in the Confederate lands that had already been captured by the Union. So the Confederate areas that had already been captured by the Union are those in the port city of New Orleans, Tennessee, and parts of Virginia. So those areas, they were already captured by the Union. So we're not going to mess with them. All right. So here we go. So if you take a look at this map, the Union states are in the blue, and there were some areas here that did actually have slaves. He was more concerned about the gray area here, how to make sure that the Confederacy would not be able to handle the issue of war if he decided to allow African Americans that were enslaved to become free. All right, here we go. All right, so Lincoln had practical reasons for this emancipation plan. Now, at the start of the Civil War, more than 3 million African Americans labored for the Confederacy. All right, so they helped grow food. They worked in these iron and lead mines, and they were also served as nurses and cooks for the Confederacy. All right, so with that being said, let's take a closer look. Um, they served, okay, Lincoln knew that the emancipation would weaken the Confederacy's ability to carry on the war. But however, Lincoln did not want to anger any slave owners in the Union. Also, he knew that many Northerners opposed freedom for enslaved African Americans. So Lincoln hoping to introduce the idea of emancipation slowly by limiting it to territories that were controlled by the Confederacy, as I said before, looking at the map. So the president had another motive. Lincoln believed that slavery was absolutely positively wrong. And when he felt that he could act to free enslaved African Americans without threatening the Union, that is what he did. Lincoln was concerned about the timing of his announcement. The war hadn't been going very well at the time for the Union forces. So the last thing that Abraham Lincoln wanted to do is to make this huge announcement to say, hey, everybody, the Union is a bit desperate. So how about we enact this Emancipation Proclamation? Well, what ended up happening is the Union got a victory, this time at the Battle of Antietam. And you know that battle because you did your PowerPoint slides last week. All right, so let's move on to our next slide. Okay, let me get my life together. Oh, we're here already. So, anyway, like I said before, on September 22nd, 1862, following the Union victory at Antietam, Lincoln announced this preliminary, proclamation. He issued the formal, and let me show you. So here is Lincoln. He has met up with his congressional buddies, and they have decided to come up with this preliminary, that word is a tongue twister, emancipation document to kind of let everybody know, hey, this is what we're going to do. What do you think? So the real one, and so you can see Abraham Lincoln here featured with some of his cabinet members, but the Emancipation Proclamation was finally, oh, let me get back off of this one so you can see this. So the Emancipation Proclamation was enacted formally in January 1st of 1863, a significant proclamation at this moment. Because the rebellion states were not under Union control, no African Americans actually truly gained their freedom on January 1st of 1863. Let's look at our photo here. So nobody gained the freedom, but still the Emancipation Proclamation changed the purpose of the war. Now Union troops were fighting to end slavery as well as to save the Union. All right. So they were fighting two wars in a sense, that of the freedom of the war itself and the freedom of slaves, and that of and saving the Union. All right. So there were some mixed feelings about this. All right. The opponents of slavery greeted the proclamation with joy. In Boston, as a matter of fact, African American abolitionist Frederick Douglass witnessed one of the most emotional celebrations that had taken place during that time. And here's part of the photo of those just absolutely celebrating this momentous occasion. In the South, Lincoln's proclamation was seen as a fiend's act that had destroyed valuable property. The proclamation won the sympathy of Europeans, though, especially workers, and as a result, it became less likely that Britain or any other European country at all would eventually or at all come to the aid of the Confederacy. All right. So there we go. So really and truly, the South had no hopes of aid. And we know that Britain played a key role as far as cotton exports and as far as weapons and supplies that the Confederacy needed for the war. All right, let's keep going. Woo! All right, African Americans fight heroically for the Union. All right, so when the war began, thousands of free blacks had volunteered to fight for the Union. Now, at first, the federal law had forbidden African Americans to actually join the Union as soldiers. And then by 1862, free African Americans and also African Americans that had escaped slavery were enabled to enlist into the Union Army. So this, my friends, was historic occasion because African Americans had never fought alongside with white soldiers. So now they're getting this opportunity to do that. All right. So the Army had assigned African American volunteers to all Black units. All right. So there were all Black units. They were commanded by white commanders. Now, at first, the Black troops served only as laborers. They were building roads and guarding supplies, but Black troops received one half the pay of the white soldiers. So African American soldiers, they protested against this policy of discrimination, which denied them the same treatment as other soldiers. And then gradually conditions ended up changing. And by 1863, African American troops were fighting in major battles against the Confederates. And in 1864, the U.S. War Department announced that all soldiers would receive equal pay. And by the end of the war, about 200,000 African Americans had fought for the Union, and nearly 40,000 African Americans had lost their lives. All right, so let me back off of this picture. We are getting ready to talk about one of the most famous African American units in the Union Army, and that one was known as the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. So the 54th had accepted African Americans from all across the North. Frederick Douglass had even helped to recruit some of the troops for the regiment, and even two of his sons actually served in this regiment. On July 18th, 1863, the 54th Massachusetts Regiment led an attack on Fort Wagner near Charleston, South Carolina. Excuse me. Under heavy fire, troops fought their way into the fort before being forced to withdraw. And in this desperate fighting, almost half the regiment was killed. The courage and the heroism of the 54th Massachusetts and other regiments helped to win the respect for African American soldiers. This soldier here, his name was Sergeant William Carney of the 54th Massachusetts, was one of the first of 16 African American soldiers to win the Congressional Medal of Honor in the Civil War. Such Union heroes had proved themselves among the bravest of them all. All right. So, with that being said, our last image that I have here is basically an image about African Americans during the Civil War. This population data was collected in 1860, and just look at a couple of things. I'll give you a moment to kind of look in and around this graphic organizer. All right, our population of enslaved African Americans was still well into the 3 millions. Escaped to the North, 500,000. Fought in the Union, 198,000. The Northern Black population, 155,000. Southern Black population, still well into the 3 millions. And then the free Black population was in the 300,000. So, despite this Emancipation Proclamation, African Americans still worked in the South as slaves on these plantations. However, many enslaved African Americans slowed down their work or they refused to work at all because, in this way, they had hoped to weaken the South's war effort, and that they knew that if the Union was victorious, Union troops would be headed their way and to end their slavery, to end slavery in which they were enslaved in. Okay. So that concludes our first couple of sections of reading. Miss Jones has done it for you. All right. So upon completing this, I want you to go ahead and look at the Google form that I have attached to this, answer the questions, and you are done for Monday, Tuesday's assignment. Toodles.